it's amazing what can happen and how people can transform if you really give them trust. They can really transform, and you can actually just not through trying, but through embodiment, show people a new way to live and a new way to love and call out their higher selves. But if you're going around fearing that you're going to be hurt or betrayed, even if you have for your whole life been hurt and betrayed, if you continue to carry that around, then you will continue to be hurt and betrayed. But if you treat people with respect and you treat people like, you know, you've never been hurt before, the likelihood is you're going to stop being hurt and you're going to take responsibility for the wounds that you have and work on them. And it also means that the people who are in alignment with you will come in because your value will be as such where you're not worried about the next person hurting you because you're centered in yourself and you're in a grounded holistic place. There isn't that void that you're looking to fill with a relationship on a pretense. You're actually looking to connect with people on the merit of what the fuck you're saying to them. You're looking to connect with them on. You don't have anything to hide, and the prayer or the hope would be that they arrive at the same conclusion, and you can just get to work together and get after it. You know.
What is up, people? Welcome to the podcast. Please click the like, subscribe, because so many who watch, who listen to this podcast do not subscribe. I would appreciate it very much if you do leave a comment, interact with me and Mark in the comments, and we'll get back to you. Enjoy this episode. It's an absolute deep dive into all things Mark William Logan. Enjoy. I'm curious to get to know you. Like, I don't know where you've come from, but for me, you've come out of nowhere, and it just feels like this guy's already my friend. Like, it's just weird. Like, I'm like, who is this guy? I just want to get to know more about you and just how you're moving and the way you're speaking. My first question would be, why do you think I've got you on the podcast? Like, what do you think I've reached out to
Mm.
you for?
Yeah, I suppose there's many feathers or strings attached to my own bow or arrow or whatever you want to call it, my own journey. And I suppose some of that comes down to, like, your question's quite interesting because it's asking me how I perceive others to perceive me.
Mm.
And so in that, yeah, a flavor of you is in how I'm perceiving. I suppose I work with men, I work with song, I'm a storyteller, I work with the written word, spoken word, film, documentary, music, and they're all really the same thing. They're all really just trying to remove the self from the center of the picture to be of service without seeking any reward other than just to do the thing for what's coming through. And yeah, I suppose I'm not sure around the timing. I think you may have been a part of a cohort of people who started following me as a result of a video I posted a while back, which for some reason, about 6 months after I posted it, I think someone shared it, and then it kind of started to get into people's algorithms again. And it was around if someone is supposed to be in your field, then they can't not be in your field. And it's the kind of acceptance and the surrender to that which gives us agency in our lives and allows us to be authentically ourselves, and also, removes our own obligation to try and force things. And I think perhaps it's around understanding who I am, like you said, like you feel like you already know me through what I'm putting out there. So that's a good thing. If I perceive you to be doing things in the world that are of value and you want to talk to me, then there's a part of my soul, but also a part of my ego that will receive gratification from that. So I imagine you're trying to uncover something in me which has a universal, applicable medicine for others to potentially tap into, that revolves around becoming yourself, whoever you are. Because I'm perceived as someone who's quite individuated, I imagine, in terms of what I am and also what I allow myself to be that I amn't. So I don't know if that answers your question, but perhaps it's something around
Yes,
around that.
exactly. I am that. Um, yeah, it's it's witnessing um what drops in, whether it's the way you've said something, or even the what you've said, like the context and how like that resonates physically, but also like there's a cadence to the way you've spoken about something, and there's the space between the words and the refinement of that, and what someone has to do and go through to allow it to come through their voice in like a centered and grounded way, but it's also projection. Like it's mixed because like I notice it in myself first, and then I start to notice it in others, and it's like such a collaborative co-creation of you've come into the field, and then I'm ready for that field or whatever it, or however it feeds in. It's quite fascinating.
Mm, it's really interesting. Yeah, you have to be ready on your side of the can that you're holding up to the wall with the string on it. You have to be understanding through your own prism what's being communicated, and then the person on the other side has to be communicating with something beyond language, right? Because so much of it is tone and delivery and the clothes that, the physical makeup of the person, the soul, how they've come in and how they've shaped themselves to be presented within the human kind of experience to others.
Mm.
So there's a lot that is communicated without even the content being transcribed. If you were to just transcribe content, then, that's a completely different world that we would live in. We might as well just, turn over to robots because, so much is predicated on content, but really it's about delivery and tone and a sense of
Mm.
intention, really,
Mm.
isn't it? Like what's
Yeah.
the person going for here? Like why are they saying what they're saying? Not necessarily what are they saying, but why are they saying what they're saying? And I'm sure I've said some really fucking erroneous things in my life, but I still believe that my intention was either naive or good, but misplaced perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think you represent to people? Because I feel there is this kind of there is this energy because of since I've been following you, I've noticed other people that I know follow, and I'm like, how do you know what's the connection? Like, what's happening here? Like, how do you know of this person? And the people that do follow you, I love it's hilarious, but I love watching like who follows who, and I meet someone else, I'm like, oh, they follow them, and it's like this kind of interesting overlapping of people, and I think a lot of it's rooted in like, it's kind of like a relief when other people are noticing others in a way that feels good for me. So it's kind of like kind of like confirmation in a way
Mhm, mhm,
of
mhm,
like, okay, I trust this person, so they trust them. So it's kind of like this kind of coherence in the space of, I say, social media. Um, but
mhm.
back to the question, what do you think you represent to people? Because I think there is this energy around like what the content you're putting out, the themes you're speaking to, and even just the topics and the subject matter, let's say, of your music, of you on podcasts. What do you think that represents to certain people that might be? I'm not going to fill in any words, actually. Just leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a really annoying answer to start with, and then
Okay.
I'll earnestly answer your question because it's a good question. It's none of my business what I represent to people, to be completely honest. And in order for me to move through life without suffering more than I should, I'm going to suffer. We're all going to suffer. But in order for me to move through life without really fucking being in a lot of pain, I have to just abdicate all responsibility of how I'm being represented, because if I'm overtly conscious of how I'm representing myself, well, in that
Mm.
there's a contrary nature, there's a contrived um, product of who I am and what I'm trying to speak to. And I have had phases of, becoming myself, and I'm still going to be becoming myself for the rest of my life, and unbecoming and untangling. But I think the one thing that I've really tried to lean into in the last 18 months, it's been a journey to get there, is giving people the permission to think whatever they want about me. And
Mm.
I found it manifest itself in two ways. One, when I get praise, I almost feel a little bit embarrassed because I don't attach value to what people say about me, good or bad. And that might sound like a crazy thing to say in a world of validation and
Mm.
dopamine and perception, but I have put my value God, in God. And what I mean by God is this present moment, like the universe. I get my value from things that can't be communicated. It's my own deep inner relationship with source, with my daily practice, with the very sacred story that I carry that only I really have a view of. And when I overly think about doing something for dopamine or serotonin, or do it for optics, or do it for anyone outside of, to be of service, to be in some way useful, and we don't have a lot of agency as humans. We're quite mechanical in terms of how we've been conditioned and how we've been shaped. But in the giving people freedom to think what they want about us, there's an enormous well of power and energy that comes with that, because in letting people give you praise and not attach to it, or not look for it, or not try to amplify it, or kind of squirrel it away for a rainy day and go, oh, I remember that time Chris said on a call that I was like a really good man, or that he really connected with this thing, just not taking responsibility for it, not from a place of like, oh, I'm just like plodding along and doing. I put a lot of time and effort and work into myself and into what I make, because I'm trying to create beauty, and I'm trying to create medicine that people can hear or see or feel or experience. It's not that I'm not trying to connect with people. I really am trying to connect with people, but what they make of what I produce is none of my business. And in that, I've gained an enormous amount of freedom, because, as an Irish man, we face a lot, and as an Irish person, men, women, it doesn't matter, but as an Irish person, but particularly an Irish man, that comes with an awful lot of judgment and an awful lot of keeping up appearances and false humility. And I had an interesting experience over the weekend. I have two friends who are over staying with me. They're staying in my house at the moment. I'm in the south of France. They're in rainy Dublin, but they were talking about, Irish people. They're so humble, aren't they? They're just so humble. They deflect so often. Like if you give them praise, they're you know yourself, and I was like, they are, and I gave them the analogy of the Irish crabs in a bucket. And have you ever heard of this story about the? Yes, so it's one of the crabs gets near the top of the bucket, and the Jamaican fisherman says, "Hey, watch, one of your crabs is about to get away." He says, "Don't worry, one of the other crabs will just pull him back down before he gets out of the bucket." And I felt like that for a long time, and because of that, I've had to do a lot of work on myself, and I've lived away. I lived in California for many years. I've traveled a lot in South America. I've been in Hawaii. I've spent a lot of time in New Zealand, and what I've realized in that is, if I'm too worried about what people are going to think of me, I won't be making anything valuable for others. I'll be ring fenced, and I'll be just churning out a very kind of vanilla, or just an angle different of what's already out there. But if I can really
Mm.
lean into, this is the whole kind of paradox, and there's so many paradoxes or paradoxes in what we're going to be talking about, I imagine, in fully leaning into who you are, being like, and the award for the best Mark goes to Mark. Wow, amazing, Mark. I really played the character well, but just seeing my journey, my sacred story, my mother, my upbringing, my connection to who inspires me, different lands of the world, different medicines. That is truly a unique experience. And we're all having a truly, out of the 8 billion of us on the planet, we are all truly having a unique experience. But if we can really lean into the prism of, I'm going to set myself free, and I'm going to allow myself to do what I think is good and I think is cool, and I'm going to keep my own counsel. If we can do that, I think we can reach something truly universal that we all eventually get to, but we need to use the vehicle of ourselves to get there. So to answer your question on the basis of the merit of your question, I would say that people see me as a bit of a chancer, to be honest, someone who's a little bit like, there's a fella over there just kind of doing his thing, and seems to be quite unafraid of the consequences. But for me, I would like to think that I'm rooting me doing me in things that are actually of value. And I think that's the metric for me, is like, is this net good? Does this work go beyond stroking my own ego? If it does, we'll continue. If it doesn't, it's only going to put me to sleep, or it's only going to create unnecessary suffering. So I should probably leave it alone.
Hmm. Okay, let's dive into self-worth piece, because there's a beautiful, one of my favorite clips of Rick Rubin. Andrew Huberman asks him, "How do you know it's worth it? What you're working on? How do
Mm,
you know it's worth it?" And he's like, he kind of reflects that he's missing the point. The point isn't to know if anything's worth it, because that's external. It's just to really do something to the best of your ability, and just to keep
mm,
keep going. And it just puts Andrew Huberman to sleep, because yeah, Andrew Huberman's trying to quantify everything, but it's like you can't. The creativity just is, and it just needs to be worked at. However, it is a paradox because we live in the world and there is a dialogue going on, whether we like it or know about it or
Mm,
give it time. There's always feedback coming in. And I think I'm at this stage now where I think feedback is so vital for me because I can't see myself fully. I'm very close to myself. I can't step away. It's like there are tools that help me do that. Meditation, psychedelics, whatever it might be. Recently, I'd love your thoughts on this because it feeds into this. I was challenged to ask 5 friends that I trust, 5 men, where I prevent them from being on my team. And it's a simple question. It was just for me to listen, learn, and it was really just to for them to have the space to speak to where I disable, inhibit, like the areas of us both to grow in this relationship, whether it's work, whether it's otherwise. So that feedback for me has been so valuable because I've been able to look at sides of myself where I'm not giving more time to harness the potential of the relationship or the situation, whether it's work. So there is a dialogue there, and I am always looking for that feedback. I'm looking the podcast. It's like I can't keep doing the same thing and expecting the same or the similar results or better results. So I do need to like, is this resonating? Do I need to shift? Do I need to like shorten the time frame? Do I need to extend the podcast? Like people have there's a dialogue there. So what would you say to that in reference to you speaking about the not getting so caught up in other people's opinions? And it feeds into a lot of people pleasing, right? Because all the people pleasers, all the nice guys, their self-worth is wrapped up in other people. And that's a beautiful thing to look at because if that's the case, then you're always going to be doing things for other people and not producing great work because then it's always going to be derived on getting seen or validated a bit more.
mm. Yeah, that's a really interesting question to ask. Is just I want to just make sure I've clocked it correctly. So
Mm,
ask 5 brothers or people who are close to you, people that you work with,
yeah.
what is it about me that inhibits them being on my team? Like what kind of
Yeah.
what kind of things come, what defenses do I have or what blind spots do I have
Mm,
which makes them kind of go, ooh, don't want to work with Chris, or ooh, Mark's really challenging. Is that the nature of the question?
yeah.
Cool. Are you asking me that question as well? What I think other people is that, or what I'm just trying to, that's great.
There,
I'm going to keep that. But
um,
what was the question?
I'd love your thoughts on the question, whether it's valuable for you. Because what I got
Mm,
from what you were saying was that you stay in your lane and don't get too caught up with other people's opinions and other people's,
mm,
you know, perceptions of you. And so
mm.
where does it kind of feed in?
Well, I'm a collaborator at heart. Like everything that I do is predicated on collaboration. I couldn't do anything really without the people around me in terms of what we make for the world, be it a documentary or a music video or a song or a ceremony. Like none of those things are possible in isolation. The only thing that I'm doing truly in isolation is trying to enhance my connection with source and transcend the human experience at the end of my life. That's the only thing that I can do. Everything else in this material 3-dimensional realm with interplay among other dimensions, of course, is with others. And I have really deep partnerships and friendships that have spanned some of them 15, 20 years, others 6 months. And I suppose I back myself on my own judge of character. And I've surrounded myself with people that are much more brilliant than I am in areas that learning or don't even want mastery in, but like inspired by or like keen to collaborate with. And I suppose I try my best. I'm a big presence, Chris, in not in a virtual realm. I'm quite a big presence, even when I'm quiet. I realize that I carry with me quite a strong energy, and it's something that was a blind spot of mine until I did a retreat. I did a men's rite of passage retreat with Nick Warner a year and a half ago, and a number of the men, because I hadn't been in a space quite as vulnerable and courageous as that, I realized that have a really strong masculine presence, and my mother raised me pretty much on her own with help from my grandmother. So I always had this self-perception that I was quite feminine, and in a sense of like, and my own inner monologue would have been, maybe I'm perceived as weak, or maybe I'm seen as a little bit silly, or not quite sharp, or the clown, or whatever archetype it may be, the jester or the joker, or the kind of loosey goosey, kind of loose lipped, kind of paddy, whatever way you want to frame it up. And a couple of the men were like, they said they brought up some stuff relating to their fathers. They said, you bring up a fear of rejection in me because you remind me of my father. And I was like, oh, Jesus, I didn't see that. And more I've uncovered why that is. And my mother is a very strong person, and has a lot of really great masculine attributes. And I kind of created my own archetype of what a healthy male is, through seeing and witnessing a lot of very unhealthy men come through my life over the years. So for me, I think the key to working with people is creating a safe space for them to speak their truth, and not pertaining to have all the answers, to actually be really, really courageously honest around what you do know and what you don't know, and then knowing where you add value. So I know I add value in terms of I can really motivate people. If we're on a boat and we're going somewhere, I have a real knack of like, I kind of know, I sound like I know what I'm talking about a lot of the time. So if I'm like, we're going to get this, we're going for this is how we're going to get there. In the past, I haven't left enough space for critique or criticism or for input from others. And most people go, that sounds about right. This fella sounds like he knows what he's talking about. He's got a decent track record. And I get a sense that he's coming from a place of love and abundance and wanting good things. And what that did was it robbed me of realizing the fullest potential of what I was working on. So what I do more and more is, because I know of this kind of gift and a curse that I carry, which is this strong energy, I won't necessarily sit back and wait for people to come up with the thing, because I know I'm a leader, I'm a natural born leader. So I will lead from the front. But what I'll then do is I'll take like everything that I've said, and it'll sound like a crystallized plan, and it'll sound like it's going to be there. And then I will create a little bit of space, and I'll actually kind of give a little bit of I'll get the ice pick out, and I'll pick away at a couple of potential faults that I see in my own thing that I've said. And then I'll say, but what do you guys think? Because I'm just making it up as I go along. I think this is a good idea. I think this is the right way to do it. But what do you think? And that external considering creates that bit of space. And then just waiting. If no one has anything to say, I'll inquire. I'll go and I'll ask the group, well, that aspect of it, like, do you think that's the right way to structure the email? And it's not like this kind of false pseudo kind of, oh, well, what do you think? And like false humility. It's more like, what do you think about that approach? Or do you really think that that's the best edit? Or that lyric that could do with some work? Or are we as a group really finding the melody here? Like, is this really sonically the universe that these words and this story should exist in? I don't know, but I feel it to be true. And it just creates that little space for reflection and feedback that I wouldn't have previously done. And then the other thing is just admitting when you're wrong, or when you don't know, and actually just having the courage to say, I don't know. I need time to think. I need time to reflect on this. But can we put some structure around how we're going to reflect? Can we actually create time and space and maybe a process for reflection that we do together, and then we come back into the group, and again just realizing everyone's having a very different experience. As much as we're using language and we're speaking to the same thing, everyone still has their own version of what the thing is and how it's going to move forward. And they also have their trauma, they also have their baggage, and they also have their own little kernel in there of what they really want from it that they might not be communicating, and their own egoic desire for how it's going to be realized. And I think being aware of that, behind the scenes inside yourself, like understanding what's driving people without them needing to say it, because people ain't going to tell you really, because they might know themselves what is subconsciously driving their reason for being there. And then I just don't really tolerate insincerity in the space. I can't be me if I feel like other people in my close circle don't believe in me and they don't fundamentally love me. If I don't feel loved, I'm not good. I will close rank. I'll become resentful. I'll become fearful. I'll become quite antagonistic in a very subtle way. So I just have to have an impeccability of trust, openness, communication. And love for me is when someone's willing to criticize me for the betterment of me and the idea. So I don't keep weak people around because they just kind of hang on and they just reaffirm things that you probably shouldn't need reaffirming in if you're looking for it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, yeah,
I kind
yeah.
of
Just to jump on that, I have this thing around really nice people. I don't really trust them initially. I don't
mm,
trust that they will call me out on my bullshit if that happens. And I need people around me that are like that. And I think that feeds into this quite simple, real conversation of, do we listen to people or don't we? And it's like, okay, it's not, neither are right, but it's the middle path always. But it's knowing who to listen to. And that comes with trust and boundaries, knowing yourself, knowing what feels true and what to give more space and time to. I think that's a big one. Trust.
massive. Yeah. You got nothing. If you don't have trust, you don't have anything really. It'll all fall
Mm.
to shit eventually. If you don't have trust at the core, it'll just fall to absolute shit eventually if you don't
What
have trust.
when did it when do you feel it came true for you to have these people around you? Do you feel like you've always had people you can trust around you, or was there a time where you had to develop it and work on it?
I think I mean, it's a constant, right?
Mm.
I only woke up from a dream last night where someone very close to me in my field felt to be doing things that made me feel insecure and worried and scared and kind of um, skeptical. I woke up from a dream last night and then I had to sit with it and go, is that mine? And it was mine. It was my own stuff. So I've
Mm.
had, people in my life, and it's funny, I'm talking to you now, right at the very end of what feels like a 7 year cycle, where I had three relationships very, very close to me disappear overnight. And I was blamed and I was the bad guy in the situation. And upon reflection, I definitely made mistakes, but I certainly wasn't to be blamed for what went down. And that left me with some wounding, which I feel I've only really come out of the last year and a half. And it's funny what's come into my experience, especially in the last 6 months as a result of healing that. And I think it came from a place of not feeling worthy of love. From a very young age, my mother broke trust with me a lot. Not her
Mm.
own fault. She was doing her best, but she broke trust with me through saying she would keep things between us. She raised me on her own. So she was like my mom, my dad, my best mate, my brother, my sister, my mom was. And I would confide in her little things when I was 3 or 4 or 5 and say, okay, mom, don't tell anyone this. And then I would wake up the next morning, I'd hear her on the phone to my auntie and she'd be spilling the tea and I'd be going. So it created this sense inside of me that a woman or a friend will want something from me that isn't me. That is something I can offer them, how I look, what I say, how I make them feel, but it isn't me at my essence. And I had the most beautiful healing moment with my mother on Christmas Eve, just gone, where I was able for the first time, like my mom's come into ceremony with me. My mom's like a dear, dear friend, and we have a gorgeous relationship. But I'd never had an opportunity to really tell her that because of how I was treated by her as a child, it left me with this kind of unworthy of love feeling, which fundamentally destroyed a lot of my closest relationships because I'd self sabotage or I would break trust or I would just deep down, even if all of the good signs were there that I was loved, I would still feel this subtle sense of unworthiness that would manifest in kind of destructive ways. And I just said to her at the kitchen table, I was going into town to do a charity gig on Christmas Eve. And I said, look, ma'am, I need to tell you this. It's coming through. And she just said, son, you don't need to say anything else. I know exactly what you mean. She got up from the table and she came over and she just held me and just took me into her bosom. And I cried. I wailed, man. I didn't realize I had all of this emotion there. I fucking wailed like tears from like a 5 year old for like a half an hour. I was ugly crying. It wasn't even like gorgeous tears. It was like, fuck, this is deep. This wound is deep. And in that moment,
Mm.
something left me where I felt like she's validated me here in this moment and I can actually build on top of this. And with that acknowledgement of that feeling, it's kind of like since then I've been building on top of that to know that I'm worthy of love at the core, that people can love me just for Mark in terms of my heart, like my soul, my intention, my divine nature, like that we all have. My my desires, my hopes, my dreams are good and that I'm a good person and that I'm actually trying to create value and meaning and beauty in the world. And that did something to me, I think, where I actually stopped fearing people were going to hurt me. And my partner said to me the other day, she said something so beautiful. She said, I'd prefer to be hurt than skeptical or cynical. And I think that that is the only way we can really advance in life, is to know, to accept that people are going to hurt us and that we're going to hurt others. But what is our duty? Our duty is to have a good fight every single day, to keep our heart open. So we're not walking around creating villains out of people who are just trying their best, who are also wounded. And in that, I think, is a real, it's a real philosophy to live by. So when I think about like waking up from a dream this morning, or I think about going into my team, if I don't trust them, how do I expect them to feel? Like when it's amazing what can happen and how people can transform if you really give them trust. They can really transform, and you can actually just not through trying, but through embodiment, show people a new way to live and a new way to love and call out their higher selves. But if you're going around fearing that you're going to be hurt or betrayed, even if you have for your whole life been hurt and betrayed, if you continue to carry that around, then you will continue to be hurt and betrayed. But if you treat people with respect and you treat people like, you've never been hurt before, the likelihood is you're going to stop being hurt and you're going to take responsibility for the wounds that you have and work on them. And it also means that the people who are in alignment with you will come in, because your value will be as such where you're not worried about the next person hurting you, because you're centered in yourself and you're in a grounded, holistic place. There isn't that void that you're looking to fill with a relationship on a pretense. You're actually looking to connect with people on the merit of what the fuck you're saying to them. You're looking to connect with them on. You don't have anything to hide. And the prayer or the hope would be that they arrive at the same conclusion, and you can just get to work together and get after it.
Mm. Beautifully said. Love those stories as well.
A few anecdotes in there for you,
I
Chris. My
know the
mom, my
anecdote,
mom's
man.
gonna probably have a few words to say about that, but it's the truth, so she can't really be angry.
Yeah, man. Take us back then. Take us back to your life, like growing up. What were some like seminal moments for you? Like, did you have, what was it like growing up in Ireland?
Mm. I had a mixed. I was only talking to my partner about this. I had a really mixed upbringing. I went to a Montessori school, which was great for me for the first 5 years of my life. I grew up in quite a working class area. My mother, single parent, she was, worked every day God sent. My grandmother was still working full time when I was born. My mum used to sleep on a mattress on my grandmother's floor for the first 2 years of my life until we could get our own place together. And I've kind of, I think the bigger answer is that I grew up in three very distinct worlds at the same time. I had awful trouble in national primary school when I went into an all boys school. And as a result of that, my mom found this really special school, very small school, but they taught things like philosophy, Sanskrit, meditation. And that school was really valuable to me for 8 years. So I was being privately educated on the south side of the city. I used to have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning from the age of like 9 until 16, because I was in that school during that period. And we had a morning assembly. It was non-denominational, so I was surrounded by a lot of different dogmas, a lot of different ideas. We'd read the Bhagavad Gita one assembly on a Monday morning. We'd read the King James Bible the next morning. We'd read a bit of the Quran the next morning, and that really gave me this sense of like, wow, there's so many different ways to approach the human experience from a very young age. But at the same time, on the weekends or after school, I'd get the train back across the city, and my mates were, sniffing coke from the age of like 14, 15, robbing trainers off lads' feet, robbing cars, breaking into factories. And I had to, I'm not a quiet, like shy type. I wouldn't be sitting in playing my Xbox. I'd be out on the street mixing it with lads who were out there. So at the same time, I had football then, which was like what I pursued for the first 22 years of my life. So I had this triangle of trying to become a professional footballer, being privately educated, and being very much the poor commoner in that group, but mixed it and had my own way of getting through, and made really great friends and connected with the teachings beyond the just academia, connected with the ethos of the school deeply. So kind of got a bit of leeway there, and people understood I was coming from where I came from, and it was just me and my ma at home, which brought about its own set of problems. And then equally, I had to be in this, working class, environment where we came from, where I had to know when to just say nothing and kind of hide the fact that I went to this school. And I just say, oh, I'm in school on the south side. I wouldn't say what it was or what it was about. So I've always had this sense of being on the outside wherever I am. And in football, that was probably where I felt most comfortable because it's a level playing field. It's all about your ability and who you are. Obviously, in the dressing room, it's a slightly different situation. But for me, those three things have really shaped me, and I really see how they've kind of like vines kind of interwoven that competitive leader who's a communicator who really is getting after life from a football perspective, but also the philosopher who will mix it with an intellectual and get to the core of like the emotional intelligence in the situation, which is something my mum instilled in me very, very young. She'd always say, you know, son, emotional intelligence is the best intelligence. And it's something that she had in spades. And she obviously bore me, and that thankfully came through. And she would just say, offer it up to the energy. Just give it to the energy, son. Just offer it up to the energy. If it's meant to be and you work hard, it'll happen. And then equally, I never felt better than anyone, because if I said the wrong thing, I'd get the shit kicked out of me. So I knew that, you know, the people who I hung out with were the same as me, and that, you know, we had different opportunities, or had different mothers and had different sets of circumstances, which enabled me to grow in new ways. But I've always felt like no matter who I talk to, that we're equal. And I still feel that today, or wherever I am in the world. It doesn't matter if I'm with the founders of Burning Man surrounded by billionaires, or if I'm, you know, in a soup kitchen in Dublin City, and like a lot of homeless people in Dublin are friends of mine through work that I've done. And like, I was on my way to a talk. Erica Gangon was giving a talk around sacred tobacco and the four directions, and I bumped into an old friend of mine who found himself back on the street. And I was just thinking to myself, Jesus, what's more medicinal? Me and Phil sitting down here having a rollie on the curb, and I'll happily buy him a few cans of Guinness and throw him a few quid, or going to this, you know, talk on, you know, tobacco. You know, so for me, I have something in me which I really appreciate about myself, which is I'm interested in people. And the more interested I've become, the more interesting life gets, because there's something in everyone that can be gleaned and that we can connect on. So for me, growing up in Ireland, it's funny, and a lot of paddies will tell you this, paddies who've moved away, and there's a fair few who've moved away, your Irishness gets kind of crystallized when you come out of Ireland, because in Ireland, you're Irish, you're not, you know, you're just another one of your own. But when you go away, you really see how well Irishness travels. And I often have this kind of thought around, if there was a global GAP party and everyone was at a house party, everyone would want to be with the Irish, because we're storytellers, we have the music, we have the poetry, and everyone associates us with drinking to a detrimental degree sometimes, which is difficult when you're meeting new people and you're traveling around South America or whatever. But I find that, yeah, when I moved away, because I was away from my culture, I found it easier to engage with the likes of James Joyce. Like, I read James Joyce when I was in the Peruvian Amazon. I think if I tried to read Joyce when I was in Dublin, I'd probably be like, I've got notions. I'm fucking in Dublin. I'm reading about Joyce. It's too close to home. It would almost make me sick, but it comforted me at night, because I missed Dublin at times and would read about, you know, Molly Bloom and Leopold Bloom and the adventures of the day in Dublin that is Homer's Odyssey. And I'd be like, yeah, Jesus, I'm proud to be Irish. And I think a lot of Irish people, when they go away, stick to Irish people. But it's this awesome global passport of people that just associate you with peace. I think song, story, the crack. And I really have found, the more I've traveled and the more I've gone to England and ingratiated myself into Medicine Festival, actually, and the people who are behind that, my partners, she's English. She's half Scottish. I kind of lead with the Scottish when I'm talking to my ma. It's like, no, ma, she's Scottish and English. My ma loves the English. Don't get me wrong. It's all play. But I think, yeah, we have something kind of special as Irish people, which is story, song. We've never invaded anyone, and we're generally good crack and good spirited people, and we've endured a lot. As most nations in the world have, but we've never invaded anyone, and we've travelled quite well. You know, there's like 70 million people call Ireland home, and only 8 million people live on the island, including everyone on the island. So for me, yeah, Irishness, growing up in Ireland, it didn't feel in any way different probably to how most people grew up. We had to work, we had to kind of fend for ourselves. But I think the drinking became an issue later in life, because there is a lot of issues that we medicate with alcohol, and the lack of, I suppose, at times, emotionality. And I'm a very emotional person, and my mom, as I said, raised me in that way. So at times I felt like, and I still do feel like an outsider in Ireland until I go away. And I found my tribe in Ireland now, who are mainly an artistic bunch, and probably a bit autistic like myself as well, but they're a good bunch of people. And we're not defined by the place we come from, but we definitely are very lucky to be from Ireland. And I think lucky when it comes to travel and our history with literary, musical people, and the medicine of the land as well. Our land, the Emerald Isle, the heart chakra of the world, the very land that we're on has so much medicine to offer, and our own technologies around using Indigenous Irish medicine. So yeah, I didn't notice it as any different. But when I moved away, I was like, Jesus, I'm really lucky to be Irish, because it's kind of like, especially in living in LA, it was like, oh, you're Irish. Oh my God. And it's like straight in on like a level of
Mm.
people associate something kind or something a little bit hospitable about your nation. And I
Mhm.
feel for people from places like Israel these days, or America or England to some degree as well, although I think there's a lot of great healing happening around that now, where in France, you sit down at a table, and if people think you're English and they're serving you, they treat you one way. But if they hear that you're Irish, they treat you a very different way. And I feel for nations like these are all blocks. We are one nation. Do you know what I mean? These are all just, this
Yeah.
is this kind of historical shit that stops us from finding our deep essence and connecting on a much deeper level. It's story, which is like a shackle. So yeah,
Mm.
I've gone off on a tangent there, Chris. Apologies.
Beautiful Irish tangent right there. Yeah, I love it, man. Thank you. So many things I would love to dive into, but I want to make space for what you spoke to. I saw you were opening in some capacity at Medicine. I saw you on the program doing some Irish jig.
Mm,
Yeah, talk to us
yeah.
about that, and talk to us about when this kind of work. When you spoke a bit about the Irish kind of still connected to culture, song, and just dance even, and
Mm,
what that associates in terms of maybe healing tools. Like when did you
mm,
meet this kind of I'm going to call it sacredness, and
mm,
connecting to oneness, connecting to, there'll be some overlap with a lot of the religious studies that you did, and Eastern wisdom, but maybe the Central South America piece was
mm,
there a lot? I know you go to the Amazon or somewhere
mm,
similar every
mm,
year, but like when did
mm.
this start feeding in, and what would what would you speak to about this stuff? Because
Yeah.
it's a big pillar of this podcast about reconnecting to these ways, and
Mm,
I'm more often than not I'm starting to be really careful with my language and words, because less words is better. um and there's such, like, even when I say Mother Earth, it's like I lose people. They don't really know. And you had a real deep dive with Brian on the podcast, and he was just drilling you on the stuff, because he's like, "Hey, what does that mean?" And I was just, I felt kind of sorry for you, but it was beautiful because it enveloped in such a lovely way.
mm.
And he was Irish, so it kind of made it a bit more kind of effective. But yeah, these ancient ways, and this remembrance that's clearly taking toll, and coming back to the fire, coming back to the elements, and this kind of reimagining of a beautiful world that we can live in simple ways. And it's happening through distribution of information, through festivals like Medicine that are reconnecting people to music, to dance, to song, and circle. So anything you touch on?
Yeah. Man, I'm so grateful that you've asked this question. Yeah. There's a good bit here, man. I'm actually excited to share it with you, even whether or not we're on a podcast. I'm really keen to talk about this stuff. Like most people, Chris, I had to go away to come home.
Yeah.
You know, fucking age old story. I had to go deep into the Amazon, find my guy, which wasn't easy, mind you. It's a fucking minefield out there, just for anyone, who's looking. And I think people know more and more that it ain't an easy road. For me to find my medicine practitioner, who's become he's my medicine family. He's like my older brother now. Like, we've had a 10-year long relationship. We're doing work together, not only in Peru, and me bringing guys out, but right at home. And for me, but the first guy I tried to find was a guy called Juan Jose Campos in prison in Paris. Okay, I'm getting ready to go into the Amazon. This famous rock star of the ayahuasca world is in Paris in prison. for practicing the medicine work. Second guy, shot in the head for practicing sorcery. Awesome. Should I knock on door number 3? Insert Gabrielle, my current shaman. Shaman, he hates that word. My Sifu, he's got a Chinese medicine background. But so I'm about to drink, in my little hut. He came over. It was on the banks of a hot spring in Ampere. Beautiful, beautiful part of the world in the South Peruvian Amazon. And just before we drank, this was early days. This was about 9 years ago. He said, Marco, I'm Irish, right? And I kind of was like, he's taking the piss here. And he goes, yeah, my name's Gabriel Patrick Lynch. And I was like, what the fuck? I was like, I've come all the way to the Peruvian Amazon to drink ayahuasca with a fucking paddy, like jokes on me, And he's like, yeah, my father actually, his father was Irish, the Lynches. And it's funny where we drink in Ireland actually has a Lynch burial ground on it, which is funny. And we only realized that a couple of years ago. So what happened was, I got in deep with him in 2016 and went year after year after year. And in the last 4 years, I've kind of realized it's not about going to these exotic places. It's not about going to the Peruvian Amazon. It's about looking at the oak trees and the hawthorn. It's about looking at the nettle. It's about looking at like the very medicine that we have right on our doorstep, mushrooms, mother mushroom, father mushroom, whatever you want to call it. It's about looking outside our own doorstep and realizing that everything around us is medicine from the natural world. Nature is our Bible. And looking at the technology of the Native American, like looking at the way they've used heat in the Temazcal, even in Mexico, and kind of realizing that, hang on, Tig Alish, like we've had our own sweat culture. We've been doing saunas. They've just looked a lot different. They've been in stone buildings with hay and they were for the infirm. But there's no doubt that they were using poaching and they were reaching states of, heightened healing spaces within inside themselves. So for me, it's about the reclamation. There's great people out there in Ireland this is their drum, this is their daily beat that they're on. They're doing herbalism courses, the plant medicine school in Wicklow, on the Wicklow Wexford border, doing amazing work just around like assimilating to the actual frequencies of nature, just with awareness and herbalism 101. Like you don't need a pharmacist, you don't need a doctor. There's 3 things you don't want to be in. There's like you don't want to be in prison, you don't want to be a prisoner, you don't want to be a fucking patient, and you don't want to be a victim. So like the medicine chest is not only within you, it's in your herb garden outside. So for me, I'm juggling a lot. I'm a manifesting generator, so I have a lot of things on the go. But what I try to do is be a bridge with what I can offer. And what I can offer is story, film, music. So I was at Medicine last year, my first time, and I was a firekeeper. So I got to see behind the curtain of Medicine Festival. And to be honest with you, Chris, I saw Medicine Festival about 2 years ago pop up in my awareness. And it triggered the fuck out of me. I was like, this is wrong. They're, commercializing the sacred. Who are these typical, like, they were like memes of these spiritual seekery guys with long, beautiful hair and tattoos and all of the honey queen beads and these gorgeous women in all white doing kundalini. I was like, I want fucking no part of this. This is not for me, right? So, fast forward 2 years and a dear friend of mine, Aoife Dedanan, she was like, there's a position there for you to go and be a firekeeper if you want. You have to have a call with Francesco, and I think you're cut out for this stuff. And you looked after the fire for my sweats in Ireland. We do sweat lodges in Ireland and have been doing for 2.5, 3 years now. And she tends the sacred fire at Ishnuk, the highest fire in Ireland, the one that the fire festival Bealtaine is at. So I was like, okay, she's saying that this is legit. And then I started to look at the content again. I was like, hang on a second. These people are just really embodied. They're sincere. They're earnest. This is a gorgeous gathering. And the same footage that triggered me 2 years previous was starting to resonate. And I'm like, oh my God, behind my fear lay an unmet desire. And I realized it in that moment. I was like, okay, let me go. Let me suss it out. And I was hoping that it would be a pile of shit and that people would be using all the right language, but just treating each other like dogs. And, it was all just for money. And then I got there and I saw behind the curtain. I was out there for over a week and I really saw that they are living that prayer, that the people that are holding that space are really coming from a deep place of healing and the dissemination of native practices and medicine, like literal medicine. And I felt high, I felt euphoria with nothing. I wasn't taking mushrooms. I wasn't taking anything. I was there in service of the fire, and my relationship to the fire through elders who were also on a peer level looking after the fire with me for 5 hour shifts, 4 hour shift, 2 hour shift, 3 hour shift. Every day we would look after the fire. And the seven sacred fires that are there really contain the energy, because the fire is this regenerative source. You have to give it so much, but it also gives back. And it's the grandfather. And I have to say, Chris, I saw behind the curtain, and those guys are working with impeccability. I couldn't fault it. It's flawless. The women and men of medicine are really weaving a prayer. And what I propose to them, this is where maybe there's some definition of what's uniquely Mark, the chancer. I was standing there one day, and I just done like 9 hours in the sacred glade, and it was like, whew, powerful ceremony. I attended the fire for 4 hours, and there was a shaman from Mexico, Peru. The Honey Queen were there, and they were banging songs back and forth. I was like, isn't this amazing? And I looked around the
Mm.
fire, and it was mainly English and Irish people. And the kind of concert element finished, even though it was very much in service of the fire. The Icaros stopped, and it was just the PA was torn down, and there was still about 2,000 people around the fire. I think at peak, Icaro, it was like 4,000 people were really rocking in the sacred glade. And again, it felt like we were all just serving the fire. There wasn't like someone's on a stage and we're like, yes, Lord,
Mm.
yes, shaman, yes, rock star. It was like, no, we're all here. The audience are just as much a participant as the people who are carrying the songs and serving us the songs. And I looked up at these oak trees in the sacred glade, and I was like, fucking, these fucking oak trees are bigger than any oak trees in Ireland, because they fucking logged all of them and built their fleets of ships and traveled around the world. And then I heard that one of the guys who owns the land, his family were involved in map making, and obviously maps became the very map of colonialism. And a part of me was like, there's something
Mm.
deeper going on. And at the same time, Chris, I'm feeling more love than I've ever felt in my life at a festival. This is a prayer, obviously. And I'm in England, I'm barefoot here, I'm surrounded by English people. They're giving me so much love, and it doesn't feel like it's contrived. It's so
Yeah.
sincere. And I'm having these connections. I was like, there's something going on here. I was like, I really feel, and the druids were around, the English druids, the song carrier Sam Lee was up in the nest doing his folky bits. Like, he's done amazing work with bringing that English medicine back. And I had this thought. I was like, I feel more loved and accepted as an Irishman in England than I do at home. If I come to a fire and start singing Raglan Road or the Rocky Road to Dublin or offer a poem, there is still that, and it could be a part of what we've suffered over the last 1,000 years or more,
Mm.
of this kind of like this self, this inability to look at ourselves as beautiful. But I think we are definitely moving through that, and you can see it now with the kind of contemporary Irish folk punk movement that's happening. It's amazing to see. But I had this thought. I was like, the colonizer is as much a victim of colonization as the colonized. And I thought to myself, what if instead of a Mexican, Brazilian, yeah, we're now a Honey Queen, what if instead of all these guys around the fire prime time Saturday night, we had the English medicine carrier, the English folk medicine warrior, songstress, water carrier, with the Welsh, the Scottish, the Irish. So I kind of, as I do in typical fashion, I brought it to the people who run the festival. And this year's theme is the flame of peace. And
Mm.
it took it through the jigs and the reels. It took about 6 months to get on a call and to really communicate the idea. And in the process, I was connected to a guy called Holden Davies, who has a project called Umasai. He is going to create it. I'm working with him on helping him as much as I can, but he's already so far down the line with this. He's traveled the 5 continents of the world over the last 10 years, harnessing the songs and the stories of the land with the song carriers, with the medicine people. And Zach put me in touch with him, and we got chatting, and he loves the idea. So what we're doing at Medicine this year is like a pilot. I'm coming over with the crew. It's around the subject, or the placeholder title is Healing England and Me. And it's around healing that wound. I don't believe there's any other container on the planet that could actually embody healing in action the way Medicine Festival could. And the idea, it's not going to happen in the incarnation that we dreamed this year. And the year after, the fallow year, I think this could be almost the central theme. I'm not going to speak too soon. It's very little of it is in my power. But this year, what I'm doing is I'm coming over with Holden, my senior editor, and my producer and my partner, and we're going to Ronan O'Snuddy of Keela, like the U2 of the Irish punk folk, trad scene, is coming over with his drum. I'll have my drum, and we've got 3 gigs over the weekend. One is on the Friday at the Goddess Fire at 5:30, and then we're in the Nest. And then there's also this healing fire on the Sunday have the goddess again with, I think there's a Palestinian, an Israeli, Brazilian, Japanese. And the idea, and they're so into it, they really met me with this, Chris. They really are, they're seeing themselves initially in medicine, I believe. They were seeing George as well. It's just been incredible. And I'll share a little bit about a conversation I had with him before we finish. But they're saying that initially at medicine, they were seeing like people really interested in Tantra, really interested in the ayahuasca chat or, the DMT experience. But what they're seeing more and more of now is like native medicines of England,
Yeah.
Druidic practices. Like it's coming home.
Yeah.
Like the real thing is coming home, not the World Cup, but the real thing is coming home, which is the connection to our land. And we are
Yeah.
one people. Like if you even look at the shape of England, the shape of Ireland, there's this inherent contradiction within Irish men specifically where they support English teams. Their parents went to England to survive and put food on the table for generations. They love English culture, grime, drill, fucking the only way is Essex. They wear all the fucking same gear. They have cousins. They go back and forth. They holiday in London. But then when the football's on, they'll be fucking up for Spain over England, or they'll have a chip on the same, like the same players that they're cheering in, week out. They want to see fail. And I think in that is like I had with medicine, there is a desire for unity that's there. And if I can bring over the most radical bastard from Ireland, Ronan O'Snuddy with his drum, who's so fucking loves Ireland, if he's willing to come and stand there with Sam and myself and a Welsh, medicine song carrier and a Scottish one. And if we can, Holden's proposed this idea of a need fire, which is like a pulling mechanism where we actually generate a fire together. So the idea would be that we all bring a fire. We bring a fire from
Yeah.
Ishnook. There's a fire from Wales and there's a fire. We'll row it on a curragh across the British Isles. We'll bring a flame. They'll bring a fire from Scotland and they'll bring a fire from Wales. And we'll start a new fire and all of these flames will come together. And my dream is that prime time Saturday night, there's 4,000 people in the Sacred Glade, and we're banging out Irish, Welsh, Scotch, English songs back and forth. And we're sharing stories of healing, we're sharing poetry, we're sharing music, and we're just acknowledging the wound of colonialism that we've all been a victim of. And in that, I think there could be a really powerful documentary that I'm passionately, earnestly striving to make. So this year we're making a pilot. We're doing interviews. We're doing a few performances on a small scale. But 2 years' time, the hope would be that this could be a central theme that we bring it home. And I'm really excited about it.
Are you going to call it It's Coming Home?
I'd love to. I'd love to.
It's
It's
actually
the
coming
no the real thing, comma, is coming home.
home. Just like a fire in the shape of a cup. Yeah, man. Beautiful. Yeah, so many fucking things in that just, yeah, resonate deeply. I want to honor your time. I know you said you had to go. But because I would also make space for what the fuck's going on. And I don't really talk about current affairs
Mm,
because you've got this sacred fucking beautiful stuff that's happening and the just reconnection to each other, to beyond labels and all
mm,
of it, beyond countries and lands, and it's really happening. And medicine inspires the fuck out of me to really just keep going. And then
mm,
yeah, and then what's happened and happening is the complete opposite, and it's in our faces more than ever, and it's just so interesting how the polarities are, the extremes are increasing, and it feels that. But also just am I seeing it more? And am I more connected to seeing it? And the whole slew of that. But yeah, I
yeah,
don't know.
man.
It's
Then
it's
the more awake you become, the more you see, right? The more you feel
sure.
it, the more
And
sensitive you are. Yeah.
sensitivity, yeah, yeah. And sensitive to the pain, but also the joy. And it really has it's that rejection of the cool, but then the real undertaking of what it takes to take that step, and feel it all and have the courage to feel it all, like Nick Mulvey would say. Yeah, man, I can't wait for you to segue some things.
We'll do a round
Um,
two, bro. Whenever you want.
yeah,
Like it's just
let's do
this
it.
is just a funny night, but we'll jump on for 2 hours the next time, an hour, whenever you want. Like I'll jump on the
Mm.
next week, the next 2 weeks. We'll do a round two, no problem. I would
Yeah,
love
man.
to. I've really enjoyed this, brother. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you for really going there and allowing me, man. I've talked ad nauseum for the best part of 50 minutes. You've been so polite and delicate with
Good,
just
man.
holding the
Getting
space.
getting
Yeah.
you in your flow, and I love that, and just allowing that is something that I'm learning because I want to like just get in there and also just contribute to the conversation, but I can do that by yeah, by not saying a lot. So it's
But
thank
I'm
you.
excited to hear you too, man. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say when the
Yeah.
time comes, and maybe part two will be less just me, and we could actually it could be more of a conversational format. So it's always lovely to leave something there as well, you know.
Always, man. Yeah. There's only so much you can speak into in an hour. Yeah, and then the men's work piece that I know you're connected to is something that is alive for me and has been for the last couple of years. So yeah, yeah. We'll let's connect to medicine. I'm going to put this out like medicine this weekend because this is going to be out a week today. So that feels good for you.
Wow, awesome, beautiful. Yeah, I look forward to seeing you at Medicine, brother. And yeah, if you see Chris or myself at Medicine, come and say hello.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I'm hosting a talk. I've been asked it's called Food is Medicine. It's on the Friday night. Little plug for that.
What time?
I think 3 till 5. There's so much going on.
Nice.
I end up like not doing anything because there's so many things overlapping, and I'm just like I can't make a decision. But
Mm-hmm.
it's nuts how much is packed into this like 3 4 days that yeah, there's
Yeah,
just so much to be a part of. But people come to me with their program and they've circled everything, and I'm like, we won't be spending much time together. I'm gonna
yeah.
be
Yeah.
I'm gonna be just like pottering and being here now.
That's the best way to do it, man. That's what I learned last year, just floating. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool, man. We'll drop in. All right, bro.
Thank
Thank
you,
you for
brother.
coming on.
Take care.
And last question, how can people
Yeah.
support you and the missions you've got? Is there anything that you can direct people to yeah, be a part of what you're creating, or just how can people support you?
Just keep working on themselves. And I'm sure you'll throw my Instagram, and through my Instagram, you'll find other bits.
Sure.
But yeah, just keep working on yourself and know that you're not alone.